The distant thunder of hooves against the packed earth sent Zara Ellis scrambling for cover beneath the meager shelter of a twisted oak, her hands instinctively cradling the prominent swell of her belly. Spring of 1878 in the Wyoming Territory was proving as merciless as the man who'd abandoned her on the trail west, a husband who'd decided gold fever was more compelling than fatherhood. Rain began to fall as the horsemen approached, not in the furious gallop of pursuit, but in the measured pace of someone who knew this land. Zara pulled her threadbare shawl tighter, calculating her odds of remaining hidden as lightning illuminated the sky. The rider reined his horse, silhouetting man and beast against the angry clouds. "Madam," his voice carried over the wind, "you'd best come out. Storm's only getting worse, and this ain't no place for anyone, especially," he paused as she stepped hesitantly from behind the tree, her condition evident even in the dim light. "Especially someone in your situation." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing a tall frame and broad shoulders beneath a rain-slicked duster. When he removed his hat, raindrops cascaded from the brim, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, yet somehow still youthful. No more than 30, Zara guessed, noting the kind eyes that assessed her without judgment. "Yates Lawson," he said simply, extending a calloused hand. "My ranch is 3 miles east. You're welcome to wait out the storm there." "Zara Ellis," she replied, her voice cracking from disuse. How long had it been since she'd spoken to another soul? Days, a week. "I don't want to impose. Madam, you're 7 months along if I'm any judge, alone in thunderstorm country with night coming on. That's not imposing, that's plain survival." His gaze dropped briefly to her belly before meeting her eyes again. "My horse can carry double." Thunder crashed directly overhead, making the decision for her. Zara nodded, allowing this stranger, this Yates Lawson, to help her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. His arms encircled her to grasp the reins, creating a secure cage that felt more like protection than imprisonment. "Hold tight," he murmured, spurring the horse into motion. "Blackwing here knows the way home blind." The journey passed in a blur of rain and lightning, Zara's exhaustion finally catching up with her as she leaned back against the solid warmth of the Cowboy. By the time a low, rambling structure emerged from the gloom, her teeth were chattering uncontrollably. "Almost there," Yates encouraged, guiding his mount toward a barn that loomed larger than the house itself. He dismounted first, reaching up to help her down with careful hands that respected both her condition and her dignity. The barn's interior offered immediate relief from the elements, the familiar sense of hay and horses oddly comforting as Yates lit a lantern. Golden light revealed a well-maintained space with several stalls, only 2 occupied by horses who nickered curiously at the newcomers. "Let me get you to the house," Yates said, reaching for her elbow. "No," Zara protested weakly. "I've imposed enough. I'll sleep in the barn if you don't mind. It's dry at least." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, or concern. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head decisively. "You'll sleep in my arms," he said, his voice gentle but brooking no argument. At her startled expression, he hastily added, "Figuratively speaking, madam, I've got a proper bed in the house with clean sheets, and I'll take the chair. But you're not spending the night in my barn while carrying a child. That's not how things are done in Wyoming Territory, at least not on Lawson land." The simple kindness, after months of hardship, nearly broke her. Zara blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of this stranger. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "I know enough," Yates replied, picking up the lantern. "You're alone, in trouble and expecting. That's all I need to know tonight. Tomorrow's soon enough for explanations." The house, when they reached it, proved modest but immaculately maintained. A central room served as both kitchen and living area, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. Two doors led off to what Zara presumed were bedrooms. Yates immediately set about building a fire, his movements efficient and practiced. "You must be starving," he observed, glancing over his shoulder as flames began to lick at the kindling. "I've got stew left from this morning. Nothing fancy, but it's filling." "I couldn't," Zara began automatically, but her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Yates smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him, transforming his serious face into something unexpectedly handsome. "Your little one's voting yes, sounds like." Before she could protest further, he was ladling stew into a bowl and pressing it into her hands, along with a chunk of bread that, while slightly stale, was the most substantial food she'd seen in days. Zara ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what proper nourishment felt like. "Where were you headed?" Yates asked when she'd finished, taking the empty bowl. "California," Zara admitted. "My husband Thomas had dreams of striking it rich in the goldfields. We left Missouri with a wagon train, but—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain. "But he's not with you now," Yates finished for her, his tone carefully neutral. "No," the word came out clipped. "He heard rumors of a new strike in Montana, said he'd send for me once he'd established a claim." Her bitter laugh surprised even herself. "That was 6 weeks ago. The wagon master wouldn't wait, not with winter coming, said I was slowing them down." "So you've been traveling alone, on foot?" Disbelief colored his words. "I had a mule," Zara explained, "but it died 3 days ago. Stepped in a prairie dog hole, broke its leg. She swallowed hard. "I couldn't save it." Yates's jaw tightened, though whether in anger at her situation or at the absent Thomas she couldn't tell. "You need rest," he said finally, standing. "Come on." He led her to one of the bedrooms, where a simple iron bedstead stood covered with a patchwork quilt. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it's clean. The washroom's through there with a pump. I'll fetch you some water for washing up." When he returned with a pitcher and basin, Zara was still standing where he'd left her, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of her situation. "Mr. Lawson, I don't know how to thank you." "Yates," he corrected gently. "And there's no need for thanks. Get some sleep, Zara." Things often look different in the morning light. True to his word, he left her alone, closing the door behind him. For the first time in weeks, Zara allowed herself to truly relax, stripping off her mud-caked dress and washing as best she could before slipping between clean sheets that smelled of sunshine and soap. The baby kicked vigorously, as if also appreciating the change in circumstances. "Hush now," she whispered, stroking her belly. "We're safe for tonight, at least." She'd meant to stay awake to plan her next move, but exhaustion claimed her almost instantly. Zara fell into dreamless sleep to the sound of rain on the roof and the distant, comforting movements of her host in the next room. Morning arrived with startling brilliance, sunlight streaming through curtains she hadn't noticed the night before. For a disorienting moment, Zara couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day flooded back, along with the realization that she was in a stranger's home, dependent on his continued goodwill. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drew her from the bed. Her dress, she discovered with surprise, had been replaced with a clean, if overly large, man's shirt and a pair of suspender pants with the legs rolled up. Her own garments were nowhere to be seen, but a basin of fresh water waited on the washstand. After making herself as presentable as possible under the circumstances, Zara ventured into the main room. Yates stood at the stove, his back to her, whistling softly as he tended to several pans. "Morning," he said without turning, somehow sensing her presence. Hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of washing your dress. It's hanging out back. Should be dry by midday, though I'm afraid some of those stains might be permanent." "You didn't have to do that," Zara said, self-consciously tugging at the oversized shirt. Seemed the neighborly thing. Yates turned then, spatula in hand, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of her in his clothes before he quickly composed his features. "Hope you're hungry. I don't often get to cook for anyone but myself." The table was already set for two, with mismatched plates and cups that somehow seemed perfectly suited to the rustic surroundings. Zara sat at his gesture, watching as he served up eggs, bacon, and biscuits still steaming from the oven. "You cook," she observed, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "Man living alone learns to fend for himself," Yates replied with a shrug, pouring coffee for himself and setting a cup of milk beside her plate. Figured coffee might not be best for the little one. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught Zara off guard. How long had it been since anyone had considered her needs, let alone those of her unborn child? Thomas had been so consumed with his gold fever that he'd barely noticed as morning sickness plagued her during the early stages of their journey. "Thank you," she managed, lifting the cup to hide the sudden trembling of her lips. They ate in companionable silence for a while, Zara realizing just how hungry she truly was. Yates seemed content to let her eat her fill, quietly refilling her plate when it emptied. "So," he said finally when they'd both finished, "what's your plan?" The directness of the question startled her. I'm not sure," Zara admitted. "I thought I might find work in one of the towns along the way. Something to earn enough for passage to California, or at least a safe place to have the baby." Yates nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Nearest proper town is Clearwater, about 20 miles east. It's small but growing. Has a doctor, at least." "Then that's where I should head," Zara said with more confidence than she felt. "In your condition, on foot." Yates shook his head. "No, that won't do. I don't have many options, Mr. Lawson." "Yates," he corrected again. "And maybe you have more options than you think." He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I've got a proposition for you." Zara stiffened, wariness replacing gratitude. She'd heard propositions before during their journey west from men who thought a woman traveling with a distracted husband might be open to certain arrangements. Yates must have read her expression correctly, because he raised his hands placatingly. "Nothing improper, I assure you. It's just I've got this ranch to run and it's a lot for one man. I could use help with the keeping of the house, cooking, that sort of thing. In exchange, you'd have a safe place to stay, food, and protection until your baby comes. After that, well, we can figure things out then." "You're offering me a job?" Zara asked cautiously. "Of sorts. Room and board plus a small wage you can save toward whatever future you decide on." He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly uncertain. "I know it's unorthodox, a single woman staying with a bachelor, but I've got a reputation in these parts. Nobody would think that is your virtue would be," he broke off, flushing slightly. Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling at his discomfort. "My virtue, such as it is, seems safe enough with you, Mr. Lawson. You did, after all, give up your bed rather than see a pregnant stranger sleep in your barn." His answering smile was quick and genuine. "So you'll consider it?" "I will," Zara agreed, surprising herself with how readily the words came. "But only until the baby arrives. After that, I need to make my own way." "Fair enough." Yates stood, collecting their plates. "We can ride into Clearwater next week for supplies. The doctor there can check on you, and we can send word to your husband, if you want." The mention of Thomas cast a shadow over the fragile peace of the morning. "I doubt he's looking for word," Zara said quietly. Yates studied her for a long moment, something like anger flashing in his eyes before he nodded once, sharply. "His loss," he said simply, turning to the wash basin with their dishes. The next few days established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Yates rose before dawn to tend to the livestock, a modest herd of cattle, 2 working horses besides Blackwing, a milk cow, and chickens that roamed the yard with proprietary confidence. Zara took over the household tasks, finding comfort in the familiar routines of cooking and cleaning after months of uncertainty on the trail. By the 3rd day, she'd reorganized his pantry, discovered his mother's recipe box tucked behind the flour bin, and baked a dried apple pie that made Yates close his eyes in bliss at the first bite. "If you keep cooking like this," he declared, reaching for a second helping, "I might never let you leave." The words were spoken lightly, but something in his tone made Zara glance up sharply. Their eyes met across the table, and for a suspended moment, the air between them seemed charged with possibilities neither was ready to acknowledge. Yates cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "I was thinking we might ride into town tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it. Dr. Jenkins should see you, make sure everything's progressing as it should." "That would be good," Zara agreed, grateful for the change of subject. "Though I'm not sure what I'll wear. Your shirt and pants aren't exactly appropriate for town." "Already thought of that." Yates looked pleased with himself. "Remember Mrs. Abernathy from the next ranch over, the one who brought the sourdough starter yesterday? She left a dress she thought might fit you, with some adjustments for your condition." The adjustments proved to be cleverly placed panels that expanded what had clearly once been a fashionable dress into something that accommodated Zara's pregnancy, while still maintaining a semblance of style. The deep blue fabric brought out the color of her eyes, a fact Yates noted with visible appreciation when she emerged from her room the next morning. "You look—" He trailed off, seeming to search for an appropriate word. "Well, madam, you clean up real nice." Zara found herself blushing like a schoolgirl, an absurd reaction for a married woman expecting her first child. "Thank you," she managed, smoothing the unfamiliar fabric. "It's been a while since I wore anything but that trail dress." The journey to Clearwater took most of the morning, with Yates insisting they travel at an easy pace for her comfort. He'd hitched a wagon rather than having her ride horseback, lining the seat with blankets to cushion the jolts of the rutted road. Clearwater proved to be exactly as Yates had described it, small but growing, with a main street lined by false-fronted buildings that included a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and the doctor's office. What he hadn't mentioned was how many people would recognize him, or how curious they would be about his companion. "Yates Lawson, as I live and breathe," called a robust woman from the porch of the general store. "Who's this you've brought to town?" "Mrs. Henderson," Yates greeted her, tipping his hat. "This is Mrs. Ellis. She's staying at the ranch for a spell, helping out with the housekeeping." Mrs. Henderson's shrewd eyes took in Zara's condition, her expression cycling rapidly from speculation to understanding. "Well, isn't that nice? You've been needing a woman's touch around that place for years." She extended a hand to Zara. "Harriet Henderson, dear. My husband Orville runs the store. You come see me before you leave town. I've got some fabric scraps that might make nice things for the little one." Similar exchanges followed them down the street, with Yates handling the introductions with an ease that suggested long practice at social navigation. By the time they reached Dr. Jenkins's office, Zara felt simultaneously overwhelmed and oddly comforted by the small-town curiosity that contained more kindness than judgment. The doctor himself was elderly but sharp-eyed, with gentle hands that examined her with professional detachment. "Everything seems to be progressing normally," he pronounced after a thorough examination. "The baby's positioned well, strong heartbeat. How far along would you say you are?" "About 7 months, I think," Zara replied. "It's hard to be sure of the exact date." "Well, I'd say you've got about 6 weeks to go, give or take." Jenkins scribbled something in a notebook. "You're underweight, though. Need to put on a few pounds before delivery. Plenty of milk, eggs, meat when you can get it." "She'll get it," Yates said from where he waited by the door, having refused to leave despite the doctor's suggestion that he might wait outside. "I've got a cow giving more milk than I can use, and chickens laying faster than I can collect the eggs." Jenkins glanced between them, something knowing in his aged eyes. "Good. Come back in 3 weeks, sooner if there's any bleeding or unusual pain." He patted Zara's hand. "You're doing fine, Mrs. Ellis. Just take care of yourself and let young Lawson here take care of the rest." The remainder of their visit to Clearwater passed in a blur of introductions and errands. Yates seemed to know everyone, and everyone seemed determined to meet the mysterious pregnant woman staying at his ranch. To Zara's surprise, there was no censure in their reception, only practical concern for her well-being and congratulations on her impending motherhood. No one asked about her absent husband. An omission she suspected was due to Yates having somehow spread word ahead of their arrival. By the time they headed home in the late afternoon, the wagon was loaded with supplies, including fabric, yarn, and other materials thrust upon her by the women of Clearwater for the baby's layette. Zara sat among the packages, oddly moved by the generosity of strangers. "They liked you," Yates observed as they left the town behind, guiding the horses at a leisurely pace. "They were kind," Zara agreed. "More kind than I expected." "Folks out here understand hardship," he replied simply. "Most have faced their own trials getting established in the territory. Makes them more inclined to help when they can." "And you?" Zara asked, suddenly curious about the man beside her. "What trials brought you to Wyoming?" Yates was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had a distant quality, as if recalling events from much further back than his apparent age would suggest. "War," he said eventually. "After Appomattox, there wasn't much left of the farm I grew up on in Virginia. My father didn't come home. Mother tried to keep things going, but—" He shrugged. "I was 16, angry at the world, headed west as soon as I could, worked cattle drives, broke horses, did whatever jobs came along, saved every penny until I could put a down payment on the ranch 5 years ago. And your mother?" "Passed on the winter before I bought the place." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Never got to see it. I think she would have liked it, though. The mountains, the open sky. She always said Virginia felt too closed in after the war." Zara reached out impulsively, placing her hand on his arm. "I'm sure she would be proud of what you've built." Yates glanced down at her hand, then up at her face, something unreadable in his expression. "Maybe," he said softly. "What about you? What was there in Missouri that sent you chasing gold with a man who'd leave you on the trail?" The question should have angered her, but there was no judgment in his tone, only genuine curiosity. "Nothing," Zara admitted. "My parents died of fever when I was 18. The farm went to pay their debts. Thomas was charming. Convinced me the West held opportunities we'd never find in Pike County." "And did you love him?" Yates asked, his eyes on the road ahead. "I thought I did." Zara placed both hands on her belly, feeling the reassuring movement beneath. "Now I wonder if I just loved the idea of him, of escape. Of not being alone." They rode in silence after that, each lost in private thoughts as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. When the ranch came into view, outlined against the fiery sky, Zara felt a surge of something that felt surprisingly like homecoming. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Yates followed her gaze, seeing his property through her eyes. "It is, isn't it? Not much to look at compared to some spreads, but it's mine. Every fence post, every shingle. You should be proud," Zara told him, meaning it. "You've built something real here." His smile was slow and warm, touching his eyes in a way that made something flutter in her chest. "Thank you for seeing that," he said simply. The next few weeks settled into a pattern that felt increasingly like normal life rather than a temporary arrangement. Zara took over the household completely, bringing order to Yates's bachelor existence in ways that clearly delighted him. He, in turn, modified his routines to accommodate her condition, bringing in extra help for the heavier ranch work so he could be closer to home. Word spread about the pregnant woman staying at the Lawson Ranch, and neighbors began to visit with increasing frequency. They brought gifts for the baby, stay for meals Zara prepared, and left with obvious approval of the arrangement, however unconventional it might appear on the surface. Mrs. Abernathy, the neighbor who'd provided the blue dress, became a regular visitor, bringing her knitting and practical advice about childbirth and infant care. "You're lucky to have found Yates," she told Zara one afternoon, as they shelled peas on the porch. "Most men would have left you in that barn, pregnant or not." "He's been very kind," Zara agreed carefully. The older woman snorted. "Kind doesn't begin to cover it. That boy's been alone too long. Works from sunup to sundown, never taking time for himself. Since you came, he's different. Smiles more. Even came to church last Sunday, first time in a year at least." Zara hadn't known about the church attendance. Yates had simply announced he had errands in town that morning, returning with fresh bread and a small wooden cradle he claimed to have found at a good price at the general store. "I'm not staying permanently," Zara reminded Mrs. Abernathy, feeling a strange pang at the words. Once the baby comes, you'll do what's best for both of you," the older woman interrupted firmly. "And I'm just saying, there are worse places to raise a child than on a good ranch with a man who clearly adores you." "He doesn't," Zara began, flustered. "Doesn't know it yet." "Maybe not." Mrs. Abernathy's eyes twinkled. "But he will. Mark my words." That night, after Mrs. Abernathy had gone home with a jar of Zara's strawberry preserves, Yates lingered at the table after dinner, seemingly content to watch as Zara mended one of his shirts. "Mrs. Abernathy seems to have taken quite a shine to you," he observed, sipping the coffee she'd poured him. "She's been very helpful," Zara replied noncommittally, focusing on her stitches. "She means well, but she can be—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "Forthright," Zara suggested, glancing up with a smile. Yates laughed. "That's a kind way of putting it. I was going to say meddlesome." "She cares about you," Zara pointed out. "All your neighbors do. It's nice to see." "I didn't realize I had so many neighbors until you came along," Yates admitted ruefully. "Suddenly everyone has a reason to stop by. I can ask them not to come so often if it bothers you." "No." His response was immediate and emphatic. "No, I didn't mean it that way. It's good having people around. The house feels—" He trailed off, looking around the room that Zara had transformed with simple touches: curtains sewn from feed sacks, wildflowers in jars on the windowsills, the delicious smells of home cooking that lingered even hours after meals. "More like a home," she supplied softly. "Exactly." His eyes met hers, holding for a long moment before he abruptly stood. "It's getting late. I should check on the new calf before turning in." He was gone before Zara could respond, leaving her with a half-mended shirt and a head full of confusing thoughts. Mrs. Abernathy's words echoed in her mind, along with her own growing awareness that her feelings for Yates Lawson had developed into something far more complicated than gratitude. The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously. as if reminding her of reality. Zara placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strong movements beneath. "I know," she whispered. "It's not that simple. Nothing ever is." But as she readied herself for bed that night, in the room that had somehow become hers rather than borrowed, Zara found herself wondering what it would be like to stay, to make this unlikely arrangement permanent. To watch her child grow up in this house, with Yates teaching them to ride, to respect the land, to be a family in the truest sense of the word. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it brought a warmth that followed her into sleep, along with dreams of possibilities she'd never dared consider before. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with the first hint of autumn in the air despite the August date. Zara woke early, feeling unusually energetic despite her advanced pregnancy. She decided to surprise Yates with a special breakfast: sourdough biscuits with honey, eggs, and the last of the bacon before he left for his morning chores. She was just sliding the biscuits into the oven when the kitchen door opened, admitting not Yates but a stranger, a well-dressed man in his 30s, with a prosperous air about him and a familiar face that took Zara a moment to place. "Thomas." She gasped, one hand flying to her throat while the other instinctively cradled her belly. Her husband stood framed in the doorway, hat in hand, looking both exactly as she remembered and somehow like a complete stranger. "Hello, Zara," he said, his voice the same charming tenor that had once convinced her to sell everything and follow him west. "You're looking well." Before she could respond, heavy footsteps sounded on the porch, and Yates appeared behind Thomas, his expression thunderous. "Found him at the property line," he said tersely to Zara. "Says he's your husband." "He is," Zara confirmed faintly, feeling as though the solid ground beneath her had suddenly shifted. "Thomas, this is Yates Lawson. He's been—" Words failed her. "Taking care of my wife, apparently," Thomas finished, extending a hand that Yates ignored. "I'm grateful, Mr. Lawson. When I returned to the wagon train and found Zara gone, I feared the worst." "Returned?" Yates's voice was dangerously quiet. "When exactly was that?" Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. "About 3 weeks ago. It took some time to track her this far east. I've been asking at every settlement between here and the Montana border." 3 months gone, 3 weeks searching," Yates observed coldly. "Some might call that convenient timing." A flash of anger crossed Thomas's face before his smooth charm reasserted itself. "I understand how this must look, but I can explain everything." He turned to Zara, his expression softening. "The claim in Montana didn't pan out nothing but fool's gold and broken promises. But I've found something better, something real. A business opportunity in San Francisco, a friend setting me up with connections there, real men of industry." "Another get-rich-quick scheme," Yates interjected. Thomas ignored him, focusing on Zara. "I've got a stagecoach ticket for tomorrow. We can be in California before the baby comes. I've already arranged lodgings with the family of my business partner." Zara felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sudden reappearance of the man she'd given up for lost, and the implications of his return. Part of her, the part that had dreamed of stability and respectability back in Missouri, recognized that she should be relieved, even happy. Thomas was her husband, the father of her child. His return meant legitimacy, a chance at the conventional family life she'd once wanted. But another part, the part that had grown stronger during her time at the ranch, recoiled at the thought of leaving Wyoming, of leaving Yates, of returning to a marriage that had never been an equal partnership even before Thomas abandoned her. I need to sit down," she managed, feeling her knees weaken. Both men moved to help her, but it was Yates who reached her first, guiding her to a chair with gentle hands. "Deep breaths," he murmured, concern evident in his eyes. Should I fetch the doctor? No, I'm fine, Zara assured him, though she felt anything but, it's just the shock. Thomas watched their interaction with narrowed eyes. You two seem familiar. Mrs. Ellis has been my housekeeper these past weeks, Yates said stiffly. Nothing improper about it. Of course not, Thomas agreed too readily. But now that I'm here, there's no need for such arrangements to continue. We'll stay in town tonight and leave on tomorrow's stage. He looked around the kitchen with barely concealed disdain. I'm sure you'll be glad to have your bachelor quarters back to yourself, Lawson. Yates's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes finding Zara's with a question in them she couldn't answer. Could we have a moment alone? Zara asked quietly. Thomas and I have things to discuss. Yates nodded once, sharply. I'll be in the barn if you need me, he said, the words carrying a weight beyond their simple meaning. With one last glance at Thomas, he strode out, closing the door with careful restraint. As soon as they were alone, Thomas's charming facade slipped slightly. What exactly is going on here, Zara? I go away for a few months and find you playing house with some cowboy. Playing house, Zara repeated incredulously. You left me pregnant and alone on the trail, Thomas. The wagon master wouldn't wait for you. I had to make my way as best I could. If Yates hadn't found me during that thunderstorm, I might have died out there your child with me. Thomas at least had the decency to look abashed. I never meant to be gone so long. Things got complicated, but I'm here now, ready to provide for you and the baby. Isn't that what matters? Until the next gold strike, the next business opportunity, Zara stood, one hand supporting her back. How long before you leave us again, Thomas? That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. I've always tried to provide the best future for us. No, you've always chased the easiest path to wealth, regardless of the cost to anyone else. The words came with a clarity that surprised her. I thought I loved you once. Maybe I did, but I don't think you ever truly loved me. Thomas stared at her, genuine surprise replacing his calculated charm. What are you saying? I'm saying I need time to think. Zara moved to the stove, removing the biscuits that had, miraculously, not burned during the confrontation. I'm not going anywhere today, and I'm not making any decisions about tomorrow until I've had a chance to consider what's best for me and my baby. Our baby, Thomas corrected, a hint of steel entering his voice. Yes, Zara acknowledged, feeling a pang of guilt despite everything. Whatever his failings, Thomas was the father of her child. Our baby. All the more reason not to rush into anything. They reached an uneasy truce after that, with Thomas grudgingly agreeing to take a room at the hotel in Clearwater while Zara considered her options. He left with obvious reluctance, promising to return the next day. As soon as his rented horse disappeared down the road, Zara sank onto the porch steps, trembling with delayed reaction. That was how Yates found her minutes later when he emerged from the barn. He's gone. He asked, hovering uncertainly at the bottom of the steps. Zara nodded. For now, he's staying in town. And tomorrow? The question held a wealth of unspoken meaning. I don't know, Zara admitted, looking up at him. He wants me to leave with him, go to California. Something flashed across Yates's face, pain, perhaps, or resignation. I see. He mounted the steps, careful to maintain a respectful distance as he lowered himself to sit beside her. And what do you want, Zara? The simple question undid her. Tears she'd been holding back spilled over, tracking down her cheeks as she struggled to articulate the conflict raging within her. I want stability for my baby. I want to stop running, stop chasing dreams that never materialize. She broke off, unable to voice the deepest truth, that she wanted to stay with him in this place that had somehow become home in the space of a few short weeks. He's your husband, Yates said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. The father of your child. If he's truly changed, if he's offering you the security you deserve. And if he hasn't changed, if this business in San Francisco is just another fantasy. Zara wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. I can't risk my baby's future on Thomas's promises anymore. Yates was silent for a long moment, staring out at the mountains that framed the eastern edge of his property. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. Stay. The single word hung in the air between them, fraught with implications neither had dared acknowledge until now. Stay here with me, Yates continued, turning to face her fully. Not as my housekeeper, as whatever you want to be, whatever we might become together given time. Yates, I know it's too soon, he rushed on. I know you're still married, still expecting his child. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking for a chance, for both of us. It's not that simple, Zara whispered, though everything in her longed to accept what he was offering. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Yates replied, a sad smile touching his lips. Think about it, that's all I ask. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. If you choose to go with Thomas tomorrow, I'll wish you well and mean it. But if there's any part of you that wants to see what might grow here. He gestured encompassingly at the ranch, the house, the life they'd begun to build together. Before Zara could respond, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to gasp and double over. Yates was instantly alert, his hand on her shoulder. Zara, what is it? I don't know, she managed through gritted teeth. A cramp, I think. It's passing now. But even as she spoke, another pain seized her, stronger than the first. Zara clutched at her belly, sudden fear replacing all other concerns. Something's wrong. It's too early. Yates was on his feet in an instant, his face set with determination. I'm getting you to the doctor. Can you walk to the wagon, or should I carry you? I can walk, Zara insisted, though she leaned heavily on his arm as they made their way to where the wagon stood ready from the previous day's chores. Yates helped her up, arranging blankets around her before springing to the driver's seat and urging the horses into motion with uncharacteristic haste. The journey to Clearwater passed in a blur of pain and fear for Zara. Contractions, for she now recognized them as such, came at irregular intervals, sometimes easing enough to give her hope that it was a false alarm, then returning with renewed intensity. Yates drove with grim concentration, occasionally glancing back at her with worry etched on his features. Hold on, he encouraged as they finally entered the town. Dr. Jenkins will know what to do. To their relief, the doctor was in his office, just finishing with another patient. One look at Zara's pale face and Yates's frantic expression told him all he needed to know. Bring her inside, he ordered, clearing his examination table. How far apart are the pains? Irregular, Yates reported, lifting Zara as if she weighed nothing. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes longer. Jenkins nodded, his professional demeanor calming as he examined Zara with quick efficiency. The baby's coming, he confirmed after a moment. Earlier than we'd like, but not dangerously so. I'd put you at about 8 months along, Mrs. Ellis, which gives the little one a good chance. But it's too soon, Zara protested weakly, another contraction building. Babies come when they're ready, not when we are, Jenkins replied philosophically. Yates, I'll need hot water, clean towels. There's a pump out back. As Yates hurried to comply, the doctor turned his full attention to Zara. Now then, young lady, let's get you comfortable. This may take a while. My husband, Zara gasped as the contraction peaked. He's in town, at the hotel. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. Husband, well, that's news. I'll send my assistant to fetch him once we've got you settled. He helped her into a more comfortable position, his manner brisk but kind. For now, focus on your breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The labor progressed with the inexorable rhythm of nature asserting itself over human plans and expectations. Yates returned with the requested supplies, hovering anxiously until Jenkins banished him to the waiting room with firm instructions to stop pacing and make yourself useful by praying. Thomas arrived an hour later, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the small-town doctor's office. He cast a suspicious glance at Yates, who sat with his head in his hands, before approaching the door to the examination room. "That's my wife in there," he announced, as if claiming territory. Yates looked up, his face haggard with worry. "And that's her child being born," he replied quietly. "Whatever is between us, that's what matters now." Something in his tone must have reached through Thomas's defensiveness, because he nodded slowly before taking a seat on the opposite side of the small waiting area. The two men sat in tense silence, united only in their concern for the woman beyond the closed door. Inside, Zara fought through the most difficult battle of her life. Hours blurred together as contractions built and receded, each one bringing her closer to the moment when she would finally meet her child. Dr. Jenkins remained steadfast, offering encouragement and practical direction in equal measure. "That's it," he urged as dawn approached, painting the small room with golden light. "One more big push, Mrs. Ellis. Your little one is almost here." Gathering her remaining strength, Zara bore down with a determination born of maternal instinct and sheer willpower. There was a moment of searing pressure, then blessed relief as her baby slipped into the world with an indignant wail that was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "A girl," Jenkins announced, quickly wrapping the tiny, red-faced infant in a clean towel. "Small but perfect." Tears streamed down Zara's face as the doctor placed her daughter on her chest. The baby quieted almost immediately, blinking up at her mother with unfocused eyes that nevertheless seemed to hold all the wisdom of the ages. "Hello, little one," Zara whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes with wonder. "You're early, but very welcome." Jenkins busied himself with the remaining necessities of childbirth, then stepped back with satisfaction. "Both mother and child doing well," he pronounced. "Shall I send in the fathers, both of them?" His tone held a hint of dry humor. Zara hesitated, then nodded. Yes, they should both meet her. Thomas entered first, approaching the bed with uncharacteristic hesitation. His expression softened as he gazed down at his daughter, genuine emotion replacing his usual calculated charm. "She's beautiful," he murmured, reaching out to touch a downy cheek with one finger. "Like her mother." Yates hung back by the door, his face a study in conflicting emotions: joy at the safe arrival of the baby, uncertainty about his place in this tableau, and something deeper that made Zara's heart ache with recognition. "Come see her, Yates," she invited softly. "She wouldn't be here without you." He approached slowly, as if afraid of intruding. When he finally looked down at the baby, something transformed in his expression, a kind of awe that transcended the complicated circumstances of her birth. "She's perfect," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. The three adults stood in a triangle around the new life they had each, in their way, helped bring into the world. The moment stretched, fragile and pregnant with possibilities, until Jenkins cleared his throat. "Mother needs rest now," he announced firmly. "You gentlemen can continue your vigil outside." Reluctantly, both men withdrew, leaving Zara alone with her daughter and the momentous decision that still lay before her. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, the room was filled with afternoon light and Mrs. Abernathy was sitting beside the bed, knitting needles clicking softly. "There you are," the older woman greeted her cheerfully. "About time you woke up. Your little miss has been sleeping like an angel, but she'll be wanting her mama soon enough." Zara glanced to where her daughter lay swaddled in a bassinet beside the bed. "How long have I been asleep?" "Most of the day, which is exactly what you needed." Mrs. Abernathy set aside her knitting. "Those two men of yours have been wearing a path in the doctor's floor. Thought I'd give them both a break by sitting with you for a spell." "Both still here?" Zara asked, surprised. "Oh yes, neither would leave, though they're not exactly keeping each other company." Mrs. Abernathy snorted. "Your husband's been making inquiries about the stage schedule, while Yates looks like he's planning a funeral. Quite the pair they make." The baby stirred, making small mewling sounds that quickly became more insistent. Mrs. Abernathy helped Zara sit up and place the infant at her breast, offering practical advice as Zara navigated the new experience of nursing. "Have you decided what to call her?" the older woman asked when the baby was contentedly feeding. "Hannah," Zara replied without hesitation. "After my grandmother, Hannah Grace. A fine name for a fine girl." Mrs. Abernathy studied her shrewdly. "And have you decided which of those men will be helping you raise her?" The directness of the question didn't surprise Zara coming from Mrs. Abernathy. "Is it that obvious?" "The choice I have to make, to anyone with eyes," the older woman confirmed. "Your husband's handsome enough, I'll grant you, and he talks a good game. But Yates Lawson has been looking at you like you hung the moon since the first time he brought you to town. That kind of devotion doesn't come along every day." "Thomas is her father," Zara said softly, stroking the baby's wispy hair. "Biology isn't everything," Mrs. Abernathy replied pragmatically. "My Henry raised 3 children not of his blood, and you'd never know it to see them together. A father is the man who stays, who teaches, who loves consistently. The question is, which of those men out there will do that?" The answer, when Zara allowed herself to acknowledge it, was clearer than she'd expected. Thomas might have fathered Hannah, might even feel genuine affection for her, but his pattern was established. He would always chase the next opportunity, the next dream, even at the expense of those who depended on him. Yates, by contrast, had demonstrated his character from the moment he'd found her sheltering beneath that oak tree. He'd offered protection without expectation, respect without condition, and eventually, love without demand. "I need to talk to them," Zara decided, looking down at her now sleeping daughter. "Both of them." "One at a time might be wiser," Mrs. Abernathy suggested with a wink. "Less chance of bloodshed." Zara asked to see Thomas first, feeling it was only fair to speak with her husband before making any irrevocable decisions. He entered looking uncharacteristically rumpled, his usual polish diminished by the night's vigil. "The stage leaves at noon tomorrow," he said without preamble, sitting beside the bed. "I've secured passage for all 3 of us. Dr. Jenkins says you and the baby should be well enough to travel by then with proper care." "Thomas," Zara began gently, "I'm not going to California with you." He stared at her, incomprehension slowly giving way to disbelief. "What do you mean? Of course you are. You're my wife and that's my daughter." "Yes, Hannah is your daughter," Zara agreed, her resolve strengthening as she spoke the truth aloud for the first time. "And nothing can change that. But I can't go with you, not anymore. Because of him, that cowboy," Thomas's handsome features twisted with scorn. "What can he offer you that I can't?" "Some dirt farm in the middle of nowhere." "Stability," Zara replied simply. "Consistency. A place where Hannah can put down roots and grow up knowing her home won't be sold out from under her for the next big opportunity. I'm trying to provide for you both. In your way, I believe you are," Zara acknowledged. "But your way and mine no longer align, Thomas. They probably never did, if I'm honest with myself." He stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "This is ridiculous. You can't just decide to end our marriage because some rancher took you in while I was away." I'm not ending it because of Yates, Zara corrected quietly. I'm ending it because it was over the moment you chose gold over your family, maybe even before that. Thomas stared at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and finally, a grudging recognition. You've changed, he said eventually. I've found myself, Zara corrected gently. The woman I was always meant to be, not the one who followed without question. A tense silence fell between them, broken only by Hannah's soft breathing. Finally, Thomas approached the bassinet, gazing down at his sleeping daughter with an expression Zara couldn't quite decipher. She does look like you, he observed softly. Around the eyes. You'll always be her father, Thomas, Zara assured him. When she's older, if you've settled somewhere, established yourself, I won't keep her from knowing you. He nodded slowly, digesting this compromise. And legal matters. Divorce isn't easy to come by out here. We'll find a way to resolve things properly, Zara promised. I don't wish you ill, Thomas. I hope you find whatever it is you're searching for. With a last look at his daughter, Thomas straightened, some of his old confidence returning. California's the land of opportunity. Once I'm established there, I'll send for her to visit. She should know her father. If you're established, Zara agreed carefully, not wanting to deny the possibility but realistic about its likelihood. Thomas hesitated at the door, looking back at her with a hint of the charm that had once captured her heart. He'd better be good to you both, he said gruffly, then was gone before she could respond. Zara took a deep breath, cradling her sleeping daughter close as she prepared for the second, more important conversation. When Mrs. Abernathy peeked in a few minutes later, she nodded, ready. Yates entered hesitantly, his hat in his hands, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. His eyes went immediately to Hannah, his expression softening at the sight of the sleeping infant. She's doing well, he asked, his voice low. Perfect, Zara confirmed. Small but strong. He nodded, seemingly unable to find more words. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken possibilities. Thomas is leaving tomorrow, Zara said finally. On the noon stage to California. Yates's head came up sharply, hope warring with caution in his eyes. And you, that depends, Zara replied, gathering her courage, on whether your offer still stands. My offer to stay, she clarified softly. With you, to see what we might become together. The transformation of his expression was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual at first, then suddenly brilliant with joy. It stands, Yates said, his voice rough with emotion. It will always stand, Zara. He crossed to the bed in 2 long strides, kneeling beside it to bring himself level with her and Hannah. With infinite gentleness, he touched the baby's cheek, then Zara's. I know it won't be simple, he acknowledged. There will be talk, legal matters to sort out. But we'll face it together if that's what you want. It is, Zara confirmed, the certainty in her heart leaving no room for doubt. I want to build a life with you, Yates. A real life with roots and permanence, for Hannah and for us. His smile was radiant as he leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers in a gesture somehow more intimate than a kiss. Then that's what we'll do, he promised. One day at a time, starting today. Hannah chose that moment to wake, blinking up at them with unfocused eyes that nevertheless seemed to approve of the tableau they presented. Yates laughed softly, offering his finger for her tiny hand to grasp. Hello, little one, he greeted her solemnly. Welcome to the family. The following spring found the Lawson ranch transformed. The house had expanded by 2 rooms, a proper nursery for Hannah, and a new kitchen that was Zara's pride and joy. The barn had been repainted, the chicken coop enlarged, and a vegetable garden now thrived where once there had been only scrubby grass. Most transformed of all were the people who called it home. Yates moved through his days with the quiet contentment of a man who had found his purpose, his natural reticence giving way to easy laughter when his wife and daughter were near. Zara had blossomed from the desperate woman seeking shelter from a storm into the confident mistress of a growing ranch, respected by neighbors and cherished by her husband. The legal matters had been resolved more easily than expected. Thomas, it seemed, was as eager for a fresh start as Zara, particularly once he'd met a wealthy widow in San Francisco. The divorce was granted with minimal fuss, and within 3 months of Hannah's birth, Zara had become Mrs. Lawson in a simple ceremony in Clearwater's small church. If anyone questioned the rapid sequence of events, or calculated the timing of Hannah's birth against the new marriage, they kept such thoughts to themselves. The people of Wyoming Territory were practical above all else, and the sight of Yates Lawson dandling his adopted daughter on his knee while gazing adoringly at his wife told them everything they needed to know about the arrangement. On this particular evening, with spring's first wildflowers dotting the pastures and the setting sun painting the mountains gold, Zara stood on the porch watching Yates return from checking the new calves. Hannah, now 8 months old and determined to crawl everywhere at once, played contentedly in a makeshift pen nearby. "Everything all right out there?" Zara called as Yates approached. "Perfect," he confirmed, stopping to scoop up Hannah, who greeted him with delighted babbling. "Just like everything in here." He mounted the steps to join her, balancing the baby on one hip while wrapping his free arm around Zara's waist. Together they watched the sunset, a family formed not by convention but by choice and love. "Any word from Thomas?" Yates asked, as he occasionally did, understanding that Hannah's biological father would always be a part of their story, however distant. "A letter came yesterday," Zara confirmed. "He's married again. His business is doing well, apparently." "Good," Yates said, and meant it. Hannah should have that connection, even if it's just through letters for now. Zara turned in his embrace, struck anew by the generosity of spirit that had first drawn her to him. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "You have," he confirmed with a smile, "but I wouldn't mind hearing it again." "I love you, Yates Lawson," she obliged, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "And I thank God every day for that thunderstorm that drove me to seek shelter under your oak tree." "My oak tree," he teased, nudging her nose with his. "I seem to recall you claiming it first." "Then it's a good thing you didn't make me sleep in the barn," Zara replied, laughing as she remembered her desperate offer that fateful night. "Never," Yates murmured, his expression growing serious as he gazed at her and Hannah, the two great loves of his life. "Your place was always in my arms. From that first night, somehow I knew." As if to prove his point, he gathered them both close, creating a circle of warmth and belonging that needed no words to define it. Together, they watched the last light fade from the mountains, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had built their life together one day at a time, with courage, commitment, and abiding love. In the deepening twilight, Hannah's sleepy murmurs eventually prompted them to move inside, where the lamps were lit and the hearth glowed with welcome. Yates paused at the threshold, looking back at the land that had once been his sole purpose and now served as the foundation for something far more precious. "Welcome home," Zara said softly, reading his thoughts as she so often did. "Home," Yates agreed, following his family inside and closing the door on the gathering night. The word contained everything he'd ever sought and finally found, not in gold or glory, but in the simple miracle of love freely given and gratefully received. And in the years that followed, As their family grew and the ranch prospered, neither Yates nor Zara ever forgot the storm that had brought them together, or the simple truth that had guided them since. That home was not a place but a person, and that the greatest shelter could be found in the arms of the one who loved you, exactly as you were.